Hey everybody, welcome back. Alright, we're gonna pick up with Le Win. Life is like a box of chocolate milk. As soon as I walked into school that morning, I knew that something was wrong. Everyone I knew and didn't know was looking at me with a strange look, and they were all talking about something in a hushed voice. That was the girl. Wasn't the teacher new here? He was pretty old, wasn't he? Honestly, I wouldn't say no to a teacher as handsome as him. But living together? Oh no, that's too far. Living together? What on earth were they talking about? Jing was standing at the door of the classroom. She rushed towards me and dragged me into the restroom as soon as she saw me. She pulled out her phone and showed it to me. It was the top post of the school's BBS form. Senior student Lei Win from Class 1 living together with hot new art teacher. There were also a few photos of me and Mr. Win, clearly taken from a distance in secret. All of them were from the evening of the exhibition. There were pictures of us at the entrance, in the cafe, even one of us going into our building. Dear God, what the hell were all of these? What did you do? Did you piss somebody off? Why would someone stalk you and take pictures of you and then make them public? What is going on? I carefully read the post again. It was posted by a newly registered account with no other information at all. The poster clearly wanted to remain anonymous. I thought about it as hard as I could for a long time, yet I still had no clue. I honestly couldn't think of anyone who would be so mad at me as to do this. How would I ever explain this whole thing? I ran to the third floor of the office building, hoping to explain myself to Miss Yang. Just as I was about to step into the hallway, two tall boys stopped me, smirking. Miss Lee, we heard that you have been living together with the new art teacher. He isn't even that handsome, is he? What do you think about us, Miss Lee? Would you like to give us a shot? I was thinking about how to get rid of these losers when I saw Mr. Win come out from one of the offices and pass nearby. He had obviously noticed me, but he pretended that he hadn't. All of my strength had suddenly left my body. I was at a loss. I didn't want to stay in school for one more moment. I ran back to the classroom, grabbed my backpack, and ran away from the school in plain sight of everyone. There was a 7-Eleven on my way home. My stomach started rumbling when I arrived at the store entrance. I walked in and bought a box of chocolate milk. I also ended up giving them the wrong bill. Then I left the store. I walked into the small alley that led to my building. I felt a sudden spell of dizziness and I blacked out. I fell to the ground. My wallet fell out. The milk box was open and glugging down the throat. In a haze, I saw a dark and thick hand pick up my wallet and throw the empty milk box into a nearby trash can. He carried me on his shoulder and kept walking deeper into the alley. My eyes began to slowly close shut. I felt as if I couldn't open them anymore. Oh no, I'm being taken away by a bad man. I'm screwed. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself locked inside a strange room without a window. My school uniform, shirt, and underwear were scattered on the floor. Everything was dirty and ruined, including me. Pain was coming from all over my body, reminding me that this wasn't the first time I had woken up. The door screeched and opened. A man wearing beach shorts and a tank top walked in. I recognized him. I finally realized that, for some people in this world, there was nothing beneath them. Robbery, kidnapping, even. I tried to back away from him, but my legs were tied to the table, and I couldn't move, not even 1 inch. I could only shut my eyes, hoping that I could wish myself into passing out again. I hoped someone had noticed me when I was taken. If only I had left some clues. Somebody, help me. Lei Win. Alright. So, we need to keep people from picking up her wallet. We can use the wallet as a clue that we've been taken. Now walk into the small alley. See how that works. In a haze, I saw a dark and thick hand pick up and throw the empty milk box into a nearby trash can. He carried me on his shoulder and kept walking deeper into the alley. My eyes began to slowly close shut, and I felt as if I couldn't open them anymore. Oh no, I'm being taken away by a bad man. I'm screwed. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself locked inside a strange room without a window. My school uniform, shirt, and underwear were scattered on the floor. Everything was dirty and ruined, including me. Somebody, please help me. Perhaps God had heard my prayers. It wasn't the goddamn man in the tank top who walked through the door this time. It was two men in police uniforms instead, as well as Mr. Wynn holding my wallet in his hand. I hid under the table and crouched into a ball. I didn't want him to see me like this. Why? Why did it take you so long? Okay, so we need to probably use the milk as a way to lure people around us. I fell down the stairs at the door of the 7-Eleven. Unfortunately, the cashier wasn't paying attention as there hadn't been too many customers. In a haze, I saw a dark and thick hand pick up my wallet and throw the empty milk box into a nearby trash can. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. The doctor said I had fallen down the stairs at the door of the 7-Eleven and broke my right arm, and I needed to rest for a few days at home. The smell of the detergent in the hospital made me feel sick. I didn't want to stay for one more second, but somebody had taken my wallet and I couldn't pay my bill to leave. Why did bad things keep happening to me? After school, Jing showed up at the hospital. She gave me a big hug and I broke down crying. Okay. I feel like we're getting closer. If we do that way, that gives us still the rank B. That gives us rank C. In a haze, I saw a pair of dark and thick hands pick me up from the ground. He then carried me on his shoulder. Oh no, I'm being taken away by a bad man. I'm screwed. I tried my best to focus all of my remaining strength and squeeze the milk box in my hand. The drops of milk left a trail on the ground. Soon the box was emptied out and there was nothing left. He took another turn into an even more obscure tiny path deep inside the alley. My eyes began to slowly close shut, and I felt as if I couldn't open them anymore. Maybe it was my final wish, but I thought I saw somebody running towards us. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying in my own bed, covered with a warm blanket. My bag and wallet were on a chair next to the bed. There was no one else in the room. Someone who had been passing by must have saved me. Although, how would a random hero know where I lived? My phone buzzed twice. Jing had texted me more than once. Are you okay? I just heard the school PBS had been hacked. Everything was gone. Feel better, okay? Everything will get better soon. Jing, thank you. Hackers, a hero who saved me, and Mr. Wen. So many things had happened today. I pulled up the blanket to cover my face. I had been completely drained. I didn't want to think about anything anymore. Poor Wen. Alright, let's do Alicia's and then we'll check the mail. A woman with fiery hair. Thursday, on the side of a brush-covered hill 2 kilometers away from Taiyo Road. Through the scope of my M110, I was staring at a factory 1 kilometer away. There was no other vantage point around the factory. This was the closest FFP available. The wind speed was 4.3 milliseconds, and there was no sign of that changing. Mil.4 -2. I had laid out the bullets next to me in a straight line, warming them up in the sun. Wow, Alicia, you've come a long way. 2:10 p.m. A small yellow sedan drove up to the factory entrance. Loading. The door opened and a woman with a full head of fiery red hair got out of the car. Her name was Liwa, She was the head of the firearms smuggling team in the Blood Gang. Aiming. I pulled the trigger. The target was down. I saw a flash from a window on the second floor of the factory. There was another sniper aiming at me. A bullet pierced and shattered the scope. I jerked myself to the side. The bullet didn't go through my eyes, my opponent had hoped, but it did give me a severe injury. The right side of my face was burning. I felt like it was on fire. I lowered my body and slid down the other side of the slope. I got onto the motorcycle that I had prepared in advance. However, on the way back, my consciousness began to drift away. I lost control of the vehicle. The bike tumbled headfirst into a ditch. Blood was mixing with muddy water on the ditch. It was black and red everywhere. While Liwa had been killed, completing a mission like this was rather embarrassing. Perhaps this wasn't the right job for me after all. Alicia. Wow, no man. Okay, so we know that the bullet pierced and shattered the scope can't go before I saw a flash from the window of the second floor. Let's see here. We need to pull the trigger and probably take out the target. Let's see how this works. I think that will do it for us. The other sniper dropped down instantly when our eyes lined up. While I jerked myself to the side, the bullet didn't go through my eye as my opponent had hoped, but it did give me a severe injury. The right side of my face was burning. It felt like it was on fire. I lowered my body and slid down the other side of the slope. I got onto the motorcycle that I had prepared in advance. However, on the way back, my consciousness began drifting away. I lost control of the vehicle. The bike tumbled headfirst into a ditch. Blood was mixing with the muddy water in the ditch. It was black and red everywhere. Another sniper. I had not anticipated that at all. I had only myself to blame. Liwa had escaped. Mission failed. Okay. So that's how it was set up before. Let's see if we do. And there's no place to hide information. I could see in the scope that my opponent had dodged my killing shot. Nevertheless, I had earned enough time to disengage. Meanwhile, while I was distracted, the red-haired woman had disappeared from my sight. I lowered my body and slid down the other side of the slope. I got onto the motorcycle that I had prepared in advance. They would no doubt be enhancing their security after this. I had failed my first mission. I didn't know how to report back to Ray. The noise from the engine echoed through the valley, and it sounded like a growl from an upset monster that no one could see, making me feel even more unsettled. Okay. Yeah, that's just a bad ending. Aiming. I jerked myself to the side. The bullet didn't go through my eye as my opponent had hoped, but it did give me a severe injury. The right side of my face was burning. It felt like it was on fire. I lowered my body and slid down the other side of the slope. I got onto the motorcycle that I had prepared in advance. However, on the way back, my consciousness began drifting away. I lost control of the vehicle. The bike tumbled headfirst into a ditch. Blood was mixing with the muddy water in the ditch. It was black and red everywhere. The mission had been a complete failure. The bullet was fired along my calculated trajectory, but Liwa was able to drop down and dodge it at the last moment. The other sniper must have given her a warning. Okay. Well, we've almost pulled out all of the endings for this one. Let's see here. Pulled the trigger. Aiming. My bullet pierced and shattered my opponent's scope and skull. Meanwhile, while I was distracted, the red-haired woman had disappeared from my sight. I lowered my body and slid down the other side of the slope. I got onto the motorcycle that I had prepared in advance. There would no doubt be enhancing their security after this. I had failed my first mission. I didn't know how to report back to Ray. The noise from the engine echoed through the valley, and it sounded like a growl from an upset monster that no one could see, making me feel even more unsettled. The bullet was right in front of my right eye. I had only one thought on my mind just as it was about to pierce my skull. I'm sorry, Ray. Okay. I can't go above that. Aiming. I pull the trigger. I could see in the scope that my opponent had dodged my killing shot. Nevertheless, I had earned enough time to disengage. Mission accomplished. I lowered my body and slid down the other side of the slope. I got onto the motorcycle that I had prepared in advance. I rode away faster than a breeze. I reported the news to Ray in the luxury suite on the top floor of Melody Hall. He was very happy. I have something for you. Ray picked up his coat from the floor and pulled a small box from its pocket. He then handed it to me with his left hand. It's a shame I can't help you put it on. Later, I put the glamorous jeweled necklace into my special treasure box collection. Then I took out a necklace with a cross on it, out of the box. It was the necklace that I had worn ever since I was a kid. I put it into an envelope. I wanted to mail it to my brother. Over the last 4 years, I had been regularly sending money to the orphanage back home. Aunt Benita had also written back to me a couple of times. She told me that Carlos had been doing well and that he had worked very hard in school. Carlos must have been all grown up now. He must have become a fine young man. I really wish that one day I could get a letter written by him. Okay, so it looks like they're working for the same gang. So I wonder why they haven't. Ray must be keeping them apart for a reason. Unless she got away from Ray before Carlos got up there. Okay. Let's continue with Alicia. It looks like it's going to mix with Changwon Min. And let's see here. At the southeast corner of Hong Kong Island sat the largest and most secure prison in the city. Hong Kong Central Prison. I gave the guards at the entrance the name Warden Chris. They glanced at my stripper outfit, casually flipped through the stuff in my tiny handbag, and let me through. No one else was in the warden's office except Chris. There was a radio placed next to the sofa. It was playing some unknown Latin music. Warden Chris's special hobby was likely the only weakness in this concrete fortress. He liked Latin music. Moreover, on the last day of every month, he would invite a young female dancer into his office. None of these girls had ever been seen again. Some people had suggested that they might have gotten new identities to start new lives somewhere else. Others insisted that they were dead. In any case, that was the only information I had managed to gather. The uncertainty made the mission through tonight a little risky. The uncertainty made the mission tonight a little risky. Nevertheless, it was the only way for me to approach him. I ignored the warden's leering looks and started dancing to the music. I didn't know the song, but the familiar melody still made me feel nostalgic. For a brief while, I felt like I was back in Mexico. I could imagine myself strolling down the street of the lovely Coatepeca, bathing in the warm sunshine, waving hello to everyone and saying Buenos dias. I extended my hand towards the warden and shot him a passionate and inviting look. He grabbed my hand. I felt a sudden pain in my stomach. I had to run into the bathroom. For some reason, my stomach suddenly started hurting. It gave me a bad feeling about tonight. If I proceed with the mission, it was probably not going to go smoothly. My instincts had never been wrong before. A few minutes later, I escaped through the bathroom window. Never force yourself when you are feeling uncertain. Ray had taught me that. However, Warden Chris had already seen my face, which meant that I couldn't attempt this mission anymore. But even if we sent someone else, it would be much riskier to follow the same strategy. I screwed up, Ray. Alicia. Okay. The next letter. Officer Ji Yoon was still in the hospital. Meanwhile, Officer Min Jun had not shown up to work for a few days either. Lieutenant Kang had mentioned that he had been absent for health reasons. So he and I were the only active members of Unit 4 at the moment. We were in room 403 of the Sunshine Apartments, but there was no sunshine at all. The room had no furniture except a fridge, a microwave, a small gas stove, and some bowls and dishes that had not been used in a long time. The thick window shades had blocked all of the light out for months, too. The whole room smelled like mold. However, it was a perfect location for surveillance. I quickly set up the telescope and pointed it out a window in the middle of the third floor of the opposite building. I could see through the telescope that a full-figured woman was having breakfast. Her lover was a drug dealer in the Yusong team of the Musong gang, who oversaw the transportation of all their goods. He was also an important suspect in a murder case from a few days ago, and he hadn't been seen in the past few days. This was my first time partnering with Lieutenant Kang. I had not been in Unit 4 for long, but I'd come to learn that it was nothing like the rumors that I had heard. Unit 4 didn't have a lot of people, but it was abundant. Unit 4 didn't have a lot of people, but it had abundant talent. An amazing marksman, a master of transfiguration, not to mention the lieutenant himself, who was a hidden beast. Lieutenant Kang had told me the truth about what had happened to him during our fight after Officer Ji Yoon was stabilized. He told me that I had met his other personality, named Wang Guan. He was a different person altogether. Young Guan was very violent, and he didn't have access to Lieutenant Kang's memories. Therefore, for the safety of his colleagues, he would usually go on solo missions. I couldn't believe it at first. I expected that the Lieutenant Kang was just yanking my chain because he didn't trust me yet, and he didn't want me to know the true source of his strength. However, when I later went to visit Officer Ji Yoon, she had told me about her own experiences when she first joined the unit, including the same story about the lieutenant. And that was when I finally realized it was all true. Multiple personalities were not common, so the lieutenant had always kept it to himself, especially about where it came from. In any case, this small quirk did not stop me from feeling closer to him. Although he was a weird person with an even stranger temper, he cared about us deeply. Just the other day, he had gone screaming at Unit 3 because their men wouldn't shut the bathroom door properly, and it was making my seat smelly. It was so awesome. As for the rumor about how no one wanted to join Unit 4, that was a total lie. They must have all just been sent away by the lieutenant, because they had been too weak. Yes, that must be the case. This was my first surveillance mission since joining the force. The more I thought about getting to be with the lieutenant alone for the next few days, the more excited I felt. I remember that clip we caught about the soap. I think you're excited for some other reasons. I wondered if he would be willing to spar with me. Actually, how about now? Lieutenant King, would you like to exercise a little? The doorbell buzzed with terrible timing. I opened the door and a young woman was standing outside. She said she was a freelance writer who lived next door. She saw that there was a new neighbor, so she wanted to come by and say hello. The writer then asked me what we did. She kept asking me a lot of other random questions. There were so many that I became completely lost. I liked beautiful women, but I couldn't handle them. Just as I was stuttering hopelessly, Lieutenant Kang came to the rescue. He explained to her that we were brothers, and we had just moved into the city. He was a journalist, and I was his little brother, who was a chef. I couldn't help but give him a look when I heard the last bit. After spending some more time with him, I learned that Lieutenant Kang, while extremely strict most of the time, also had a lot of tricks up his sleeves. The writer had not stopped ogling the lieutenant ever since she had first laid eyes on him. See, that was our lieutenant, attractive in every possible aspect. He quickly got rid of her, then told me to keep a close eye on the room, and then told me to keep a close eye on the room that we were watching before he left. He must have gone grocery shopping in preparation for the next few days. I used to hear Officer Mi-jun tell stories about how they'd always have nothing but kimchi-flavored ramen. It wasn't particularly healthy, but as part of the mission, I was perfectly fine with ramen. Besides, I loved kimchi. However, 20 minutes later, all I could see in front of my eyes was an entire grocery bag of ice cream. My heart was bleeding. How did I forget that the lieutenant ate nothing but high-calorie junk food? Officer Mi-jun must have bought that ramen himself. I sat next to the lieutenant and resigned myself to my fate. I kept an eye on the mistress while munching on ice cream. I ate an ice cream cone while she was watching TV. I ate an ice cream cone while she was watering the flowers. I had an ice cream cone while she was making lunch. I ate an ice cream cone while she was taking a nap. I ate an ice cream cone while she was ice creaming. When it was almost sunset, the ice cream was starting to make the ice cream of the night, and my ice cream began to rumble. Ugh, ice cream, 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 ice cream. The doorbell buzzed at an inappropriate time once again. I opened the door. It was the writer again. She was carrying a bag of groceries. You guys haven't eaten dinner, have you? Shall we eat together? I have some extra food. Besides, I would really love to witness the chef's skills. She walked past me and went straight into the house. She changed into a pair of slippers while standing in the doorway and kept peeking around the room. I could tell that dinner was not her real purpose. However, my stomach full of ice cream had me on the edge of a meltdown. Looking at that bag of fresh vegetables and meats, I couldn't help but salivate over it. Wait a second, the chef? Was she referring to me? Well, Lieutenant, shouldn't you be the responsible for your lies? Just as I was thinking about him, Lieutenant Kang came up to the doorway too. He slammed one hand onto the wall with a bang. At the doorway, Lieutenant Kang stared at the writer with a lustful look. What a shame, we've just eaten. Sure, ice cream. Although I usually go to bed later than my brother here. Wait, what? Who between us always starts setting up his bed before 7 p.m.? Can I come over later? I'm not a bad cook myself. Who can cook a milkshake? Well, you could just take the stuff out of the fridge and set them aside for half an hour. To my surprise, the writer seemed really into that idea. In that case, I won't bother you now then. Well, goodbye, but leave the food. As for tonight, I don't sleep until late either. You're welcome to join me for a late night snack. You look so excited that I think you could go on for days without sleeping at all. At last, the writer finally left. I let out a sigh of relief and went back to the window. Oh crap! The person at the bottom of the building was the drug dealer we had been waiting for. He was about to take off. We rushed downstairs, but there was no sign of him anymore. For the next few days, we never saw him show up at his mistress's place. Considering that he had left in such a hurry, he probably would not be coming back anytime soon. Mission failed. Chang Wang-min. Okay. So then. We can't have her feel the stomach pain. She needs to kill the guy. have Lieutenant grab him. Let's see. Perhaps my passion had infected the warden too. He was beginning to get a different look in his eyes. There was something twisted and dangerous about that look. Feeling a little uneasy, I decided to make my move immediately so that I could complete the mission and protect myself before being exposed. Warden Chris suddenly began struggling to breathe. He fell to the ground while grabbing at his own neck with his hand. His face turned into a dangerous purple color. He would never see the tiny scratch on the back of his neck that was killing him. I calmed myself, took off the poisonous fake fingernails and the excessive dress, and jumped out of the bathroom window. Go! I'd barely pulled up my pants when Lieutenant Kane grabbed my arm and led me out from the bathroom and kept running outside. We ran into the drug dealer who was just leaving from the building on the opposite side of the street. He took a glance at Lieutenant Kane and immediately started running as soon as he recognized him. The guy was pretty fast. We ran after him for a few blocks before we finally trapped him in a small alley from both ends. The next day in the interrogation room, he was very tight-lipped, refused to answer any of our questions. After half an hour without any progress, Lieutenant Kang stood up and turned off the video camera. He went back to his seat and leaned closer to the table. He whispered to the guy, "How about we make a deal?" A deal? What kind of trick was Lieutenant Kang trying to play now? The guy was apparently as curious as me. He leaned forward waiting to hear what the lieutenant had to say. Lieutenant Kang pulled out a switchblade. He flicked it open and stabbed it into the back of the guy's left hand in one clean move. The guy screamed out loud, but he didn't move, worried about hurting his hand even more. I suppose even he was unwilling to risk his own life. He finally started talking while he shook in pain. If I answer your questions, are you going to recommend a lighter sentence?" Lieutenant Kang smiled and pulled the knife out. He put it away without even wiping the blood off. After he gave us his statement, the dealer took off his jacket and threw it aside while cursing nonstop. That was when I saw a giant green python tattooed on his left arm. The lieutenant suddenly went quiet. I called his name more than a few times, but he finally came back to himself. He stood up, patted me on the shoulder, and, before he left the room, said to me, "He's yours now. Make him pay." Okay. That was good on us. Let's see here. We have a new character.
No puedo regresar.
만약 돌아갈 수만 있다면.
I'm curious. Let's see who this is. In the 113th minute, Mario Götze stopped the ball and hit a perfect shot. Goal! Argentina had lost in the World Cup final. It was over. Game over. Oh, come on. I had stayed up the whole night for this? I pounded the table as hard as I could. No one was going to complain anyway. Everyone had already gone home. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here watching the finale all by myself. Gakko had been over a month ago. My best friends were all traveling around the country. No, around the globe. One would have to be completely nuts to still be living in the school dorm. Yes, I was talking about myself. Well, Jimmy too. Since my family was moving and my parents were both too busy with their jobs, they had told me to stay at school for a couple more days. What was worse, I had to be in charge of moving myself, so I was unable to go out and have some fun. The last summer of high school. Wasted. Oh, so this must be Rocky. I didn't know what Jimmy had been up to recently. See, it wasn't even 5 a.m. yet, and he was already gone. Well, we wouldn't be spending too many more days together anyways. Jimmy had said his father's business seemed to be going well now, so he would be going back to Hong Kong soon. I told him that I'd like to do a formal send-off for him. By formal, I just meant getting some grilled chicken wings at the grill bar near school. He said it wasn't necessary. What a killjoy. I was too tired. I decided to eat that apple before I went back to bed. I rinsed the apple off and put it on the desk, but I accidentally knocked it onto the floor. "You dare hide from me, Apple? I'm going to wash you again, and you are still getting eaten." I looked down and noticed a basin under Jimmy's bed. It was giving off a faint smell. I had a bad feeling about this. I pulled it out from under the bed out of curiosity. Oh boy. Dear God. I don't really believe in God, but I had to call out his name. It was filled with dirty clothes, and stinking socks all submerged in water. And the real problem? Who knew how long these things had been there? I didn't even dare to guess the age of the little mushrooms that were growing and thriving on the clothes. A strong, sour smell filled the air. Just like that, it was sitting in the middle of our room for over an hour. Jimmy finally came back. I had decided not to go to sleep just so I could confront him about this disgusting thing. I had been staring at it the entire time, and I felt like I might pass out any moment. Jimmy, did you ever worry about us getting cancer with a chemical weapon like this in our room? All right, I'll clean it up now. And then he just dumped the entire basin, including the mushrooms, all into the common washing machine. Dear Lord. I had to call out his name once again. Jimmy had always been a great friend, smart, reliable, loyal. The only problem was that he never cared about hygiene. I had always considered myself to be pretty messy, but I had never imagined I would meet someone even worse. I was stunned. Rocky. Okay. The weather had been getting warmer. I sat on the roof of the classroom building, watching the boys down on the basketball court. They were trying to compete to see who looked the coolest while making a shot. So childish. A few days ago, photos of me and Mr. Wynn had been posted on the school BBS and had gone viral in the school. I had to explain the whole thing to Miss Yang and even the school supervisor. People in the school eventually learned that we were just neighbors, and we had not been living together. Still, there were some trashy people who insisted that it was not a coincidence that we were living so close. There were even some more blatant people who would follow me after school. However, those people were not going to get anything, because ever since that day I had not seen him myself. He hadn't come to school. He hadn't been home. The lights had been off every night. I didn't have the courage to go and knock on his door, even though it was right next to mine. Maybe he had moved away, since I had brought him too much trouble. Just when my mind was racing all over the place, I got a text message from Jing. Breaking news. Mr. Wynn is back. The art class this afternoon will resume as normal. I couldn't believe my eyes. However, he must have gone missing all these days because of the photos and everything. If I went to his class, wouldn't people in class gossip about us? Then I would be causing him even more trouble. But if I didn't go, people would still be gossiping, right? What should I do? The dessert today in the school's cafeteria was yogurt. I opened a cup, but then didn't really have much of an appetite for it. So I just left it on the table. It was so hot today. I moved my hand and knocked it over. The yogurt spilled all over the floor, making a big white mess. I took out some napkins and wiped the floor absent-mindedly. By the time it was done, the art class was already over. I lay on the roof, staring at the gray sky. Another text from Jing. The classroom was full today. You should have been there to see how I shut those people up for bad-mouthing you. Oh, and at the end of class, Mr. Wynn tore up everybody's sketches. This man. I probably should have gone to the class. What should I do about the class the day after tomorrow? Lei Wynn. Alrighty, so. Hey, I just realized. Have Jimmy and Rocky both graduated from high school already? Lei Wynn's letters was about something that happened not long after the previous incident. She must still be in high school, right?
You're right. Even though their letters arrived together for us, the events they experienced might not have happened at the same time. In fact, they could have happened days apart, or months, years, even centuries apart. For us, time is not an absolute concept. It's only relative. When we receive their letters is purely determined by the casual links among them. For example, we have received a letter saying that Jimmy would be going back to Hong Kong after graduation. That means this event was already bound to happen.
I see. Okay. If she doesn't knock over the yogurt, then she doesn't have to spend all that time cleaning it up, and she should be able to make the class. The yogurt tasted stronger than usual. Had it gone bad, maybe? Well, that would actually be great for me. I could just go and hide in the infirmary. I could just go and hide in the infirmary with a stomachache as my excuse. With such a legitimate reason, nobody should be able to say anything else about me. I held my breath and drank the whole cup. The art class was on the way to the infirmary. I couldn't help myself, so I snuck up to the back door. and tried to peek inside through the small glass window. They were doing sketch practice today. Mr. Wynne was standing with his back towards me, looking at Rocky's sketch. What was Rocky drawing that Mr. Wynne would be watching so closely? I stood up on my toes. He suddenly turned around. Thank God I crouched down just in time. However, the sudden movement must have caused my stomach to start hurting. It felt like it was a really bad cramp. Fortunately, it wasn't too bad. I finally got to the infirmary with a hand pressed against my stomach. I stayed there until the end of school. Jimmy finally came back. His gaming console was lying in the middle of the spilled water like an island in the middle of the dark lake. He lost it. How dare you break my console? How dare you not wash your clothes for so long? That's none of your business. Oh, but it is, and it's not even the first time. What are you talking about? I'm talking about those photos that you secretly took. I'm the one who posted them. What did you just say? You have a crush on Lei Wen, right? You even stalked her? You are such a psycho and a loser. If you really like her, why didn't you just tell her already? So Jimmy! Oh, Jimmy was the one that took the photos. We knew that. But Rocky was the one that posted? Then Jimmy must have hacked the site and took them all down. None of your business! Jimmy tossed his console away and lunged at me. We were wrestling and rolling in all of the dirty water until the RA pulled us apart. Ew. He made it clear that if we hadn't already graduated, he would have made sure that we suffered the most severe consequences. That night, Jimmy and I went to a grill bar near school and ate an unhealthy amount of chicken wings. That was the end of our high school era. I would miss it. It's such a boy thing to do. Beat each other up and then go and eat wings. Okay. Let's try this. Okay, we'll change Jimmy's fate, or Rocky's fate. Jimmy had always half-assed everything, and he had never followed through with anything. He would never learn if I didn't teach him a lesson this time. Plus, I really couldn't stand this any longer. His dirty clothes and the mushrooms had spilled on the floor with the smelly water flooding throughout the room. Here comes the star of the show. Jimmy just walked in. He let out a grunt of surprise and immediately walked over to his bed to pick up his precious gaming console. He had even stepped over a few mushrooms. You win. Jimmy recognized my anger and started cleaning the room without a word. As long as he learned his lesson. Let's see here. So we still have to get her rank S. Okay, so it needs this part. Let's see here. So we've unlocked all of the endings for Rocky. But we still have a bad ending and a good ending for Lei Wen. The yogurt tasted kind of strange, or stranger than usual, I should say. Well, if it had gone bad, that would actually be great for me. I could just go and hide in the infirmary with a stomachache as my excuse. With such a legitimate reason, nobody could say anything else about me. I held my breath and drank the whole cup. The art classroom was on the way to the infirmary. I couldn't help myself, so I snuck up to the back door and tried to peek inside through the small glass window. Rocky was sound asleep, drooling with his mouth open. Jing was so focused. Mr. Wynn would be insane to tear up her sketch this time. Mr. Wynn was standing with his back towards me, looking at Jing's sketch. He must have liked it to be looking at it so closely. I stood up on my toes and tried to see her sketch for myself. But he suddenly turned around. Thank God I crouched down just in time. However, the sudden movement must have caused my stomach to start hurting. It felt like it was a bad cramp. And it was getting worse and worse. I leaned against the door and crumpled. I felt like I was dreaming. In my dream, he was carrying me on his back and asking me where I wanted to go. I said I wanted to go see the rainbow on Shangri-La Mountain. I heard that the rainbow was gorgeous there. He said okay. But Shangri-La Mountain was hard to get to. Even taxis wouldn't take us. So Mr. Wen kept carrying me on his back, and he kept running, and running. I fell asleep in the dream too. But did we ever get to see the rainbow or not? Nevertheless, it didn't really matter. I just wanted the dream to last a little longer, and longer, and longer. Yay, we got them both. Okay. Street fight. And the final goodbye. Let's do a black box and disaster in Unit 4. 2 p.m. The 32nd floor of the Shangri-La Corp building. The women's restroom. I pressed the button on my phone, timed to the movement of my 2 p.m. The 32nd floor of the Shangri-La Corp building, the women's restroom. I pressed the button on my phone, timed to the movement of the hands on my watch. Almost immediately, I heard a muffled boom from the bottom of the building. The entire building shook slightly for a few seconds and made a subtle grinding sound. I heard the latest instructions come from the building security team leader on the radio, broadcasting through their dedicated security channel. He wanted 2 guards on the top floor and the rest on the ground floor. I turned off the radio and walked out of the bathroom in a janitor's uniform. I blended into a crowd of panicked and confused salarymen. Then I ducked into the security stairwell and went up to the 33rd floor, the highest floor of the building, which was reserved exclusively for the chief executives of the corporation. I reached for the knife hidden at my waist. I planned to ambush the 2 guards before they noticed me. However, there was no one in the hallway. I opened the door to the president's office. There was no one there either. I began to scour through the office. When I opened the closet, a body rolled out from the inside. I began to scour through the office. When I opened the closet, a body rolled out from inside. The door was kicked open. I took 2 steps back, then sprinted forward and burst through the window. I held onto the rope with my right hand and descended all the way to the ground from the outside of the building. A couple of people had seen me while I was dropping down and let out some admiring and terrified gasps. But their attention was soon pulled away by the explosions from the top floor. The body in the closet had been my target tonight, the president of the Shangri-La Corp, Lingguan Zhailong. Someone had gotten to him before I could. What I couldn't understand, though, was why a bomb was tied to his body. It was the kind of bomb that would detonate upon disturbance, or when the timer ran out. It was much more powerful than the one I had made. I could only think of one reason. The other assassin had known that someone else was after the same target, so it had been a prank. In fact, my mission tonight was more than just killing Liang. There was something else. I was supposed to retrieve a black metal box that he had. I had no idea what was inside the box, but it must be something extremely important. However, I was afraid that the box had fallen into the hands of the other assassin, too. Who could this person be? Had he known that Ray had also been looking for the same box? Was the prank specifically designed for me? Pain from my left arm interrupted my thoughts. Only then did I realize that my left arm had been blown into pieces. My left palm had completely disappeared. Alicia. That is some dedicated sleuthing if you're not even going to notice that your left arm is completely, blown to bits. Lieutenant Kang was not here, and neither was Officer Min Jun nor Officer Ji Yeon. I was alone in the office, working on the suspect's statement and feeling a little lonely. The lieutenant had told me to make him pay. Officer Ji Yeon had said to me that Lieutenant Kang used to tamper with the amount of goods and money when dealing with smuggling cases, so that the criminals would get a heavier sentence. But this guy was already an accomplice to a murder. How could I make this case worse? I didn't know what to do. I was scratching my head when the phone on the lieutenant's desk rang. It was an anonymous tip to a murderer. However, Unit 4 usually handled cases related to gang violence or drugs. Why would we get a tip about a murderer? I wasn't sure how to deal with this situation, although I didn't have much at hand to deal with right now anyway. My heart of justice was beating with excitement. I grabbed my gun and walked out. I was about to take the stairs when I had heard someone yelling loudly behind me. I turned around. It was Lieutenant Kim Jong-hyu of Unit 3. Lieutenant Kim asked if I was heading to the murder scene reported by the anonymous tip earlier. He had said I should not go alone, and that he was coming along with me so that we could look after each other. It seemed like a good idea. We got into his patrol car and started the siren. 20 minutes later, we arrived at the apartment building of the scene. It was a 2-floor rental building. I could vaguely see fire through the windows of one apartment in the middle of the second floor. Something wasn't right. Anybody home? I knocked on the door. There was no response. I knocked even harder and yelled some more, but still nothing. Lieutenant Kim stopped me and said we should just wait for the apartment manager to open the door for us. The whole apartment had been engulfed in fire. When the manager turned the key and touched the doorknob, he suddenly jumped back like he had been shocked. I stepped ahead and grabbed the knob. It felt like soldering iron burning my palm. I bit my own lip to stop myself from screaming. As soon as I forced the door open, flames leapt out of the apartment along with a wave of heat. I could almost smell my hair getting burnt. Lieutenant Kim and I had to take a few steps back. If the tips had been true, there might still be people inside. I took a step towards the door, but Lieutenant Kim grabbed me. "Are you crazy? Look at the fire! You'll be burned to ashes! We've been here for over 20 minutes. Whoever might still be in there is already dead." He made a good point. We waited until the firefighters put out the fire before we finally went into the apartment. Everything inside had been scorched. All of the furniture had been incinerated. We found 2 bodies that were completely unrecognizable due to the fire. One in the bathroom, the other in the living room. We had to send them back for autopsies. We didn't learn the identities of the bodies until the next day. I could not have imagined that they were Officer Min Jun and Lieutenant Kang. I should have charged inside. I could have saved them. Chang Guanming. No. Okay, let's see here. Let's see here. If we kick the door open, maybe if we set that building on fire. Oh, wow, I'm so confused. I don't know what to do. Okay, so nothing changed on her side, but we've changed his. No one was in the bedroom. A lot of empty beer bottles were scattered on the floor, most of which were empty. Some of them were not empty, though, and the beer had spilled all over the place. There were still a lot of burning candles on the floor, too. Lieutenant Kang is passed out over here. I heard Lieutenant Kim's voice coming from the bathroom. I ran to the bathroom. Lieutenant Kang looked extremely pale. His lips were purple and he was unconscious. I had no time to wonder how on earth Lieutenant Kang had ended up here. We drove him to the hospital immediately. The doctor told us that Lieutenant Kang had suffered from alcohol poisoning. Thank goodness that he had gotten him here in time. If we had been a little bit later, the consequences would have been severe. Lieutenant Kang survived. However, he had left so hastily that we hadn't noticed the unusual thing hidden in the living room at the time. The next day, I went to visit the lieutenant, who was still in a coma, but a bunch of men from Unit 3 kicked me out once again. They told me that Officer Min Jun's body had also been found in Lieutenant Kang's home. They had reason to believe that Min Jun was murdered and that the lieutenant might be heavily involved. From now on, they were putting him under 24-hour surveillance. Okay. Let's see here. Oh. See here, this changes both of their fates. I recognized the man lying on the floor. Officer Min Jun's eyes were wide open. There was a dark brown stain near his chest on his dark-colored shirt. The blood had already dried. Before I could check any further, the officers from Unit 3 who had followed us here had pushed me aside and started examining the body themselves and taking notes. It was a little strange. I was the one who had received the tip in the first place, but the scene had now been overrun by Unit 3. Soon the CSI unit arrived too. I still couldn't quite accept Officer Min Jun's death, as the guys from Unit 3 wouldn't let me near the body. I had no choice but to wander around the living room. When I walked past a dresser in the living room, I noticed a knocked-over picture frame. I flipped it over. It was a photo of Lieutenant Kang with a woman in her 30s.
Hey, you! Don't touch anything! Yes, you!
The men from Unit 3 kicked me out of the apartment. I had to stand by the door and watch them carry Officer Min Jun's body away in a body bag. Even more bizarrely, they had found Lieutenant Kang passed out in the bathroom due to apparent alcohol poisoning. I only found out later that the place had been Lieutenant Kang's apartment. I held onto the rope with my right hand and descended all the way to the ground from the outside of the building. I was also carrying a black metal box in my left arm. I had accidentally found the box when I dropped down the floor to get away from the heavy smoke. It had been glued to the bottom of the couch. Although Ling Zhongling was nowhere to be found, Ray had instructed me that the metal box was my top priority. The guards broke into the office just after I had escaped through the window. I could hear him directing their whole team to go after me, but it was already too late. I started my motorcycle and went into full throttle. Minutes later, I had arrived at the back alley behind Melody Hall. Ray opened the box in front of me. Inside of the box were 2 cubes the size of a palm with different markings on them. Ray gave me a reward after he made sure the items were intact. After that day, I had a dragon tattoo put on my stomach. Ray said that I had earned that mark as evidence that I had truly become his. Okay, so she got the S. An A rank. Let's see. How do I get him? She only finds it. My target, the president of Shaolin Corp, Ling Zhaolong, was supposed to be in the office, but he was nowhere to be found. Besides killing him, I had an even more important task, which was to find a black metal box. I got lucky. I accidentally found the metal box that Ray had asked me to find when I dropped down to the floor to get away from the heavy smoke. It had been glued to the bottom of the couch. After leaving the office, I ducked into the security stairwell again. There was almost nobody in it. I was wearing a janitor's uniform and calmly started walking down from the 33rd floor. I got down to the 5th floor. 4 security guards, followed by someone in a dark coat, walked past me, climbed up the stairs. The person in the coat looked a little familiar, so I turned my head and took another glance at him. Then I realized that he was looking at me, too. And then I remembered. He was the doctor summoned to check up on me at Money G's mansion. Money G's entire household had been wiped out, and everyone in the underground world knew that the Black Dragon Gang had done it. Yet nobody dared say a word about it. After all, Money G was merely a money man who had no other connections or support. Nobody knew that there had been any survivors from the unfortunate accident. But if anybody were to survive, That person must be deeply involved with the Black Dragon gang. If the doctor had recognized me and told anyone about my presence, Shingerlong Corp would be able to connect the gang to their boss's death. Rory would be in serious trouble. We were getting further away from each other, one step at a time, and this uneasy feeling kept dripping from my heart like a leaking water tap, one drop at a time. I made up my mind just before they were about to disappear at the corner of the stairs. My dagger cut through the air like a silver lightning bolt and went through the doctor's throat. In the next second, 4 bullets left their silencer of my gun and took out the others in the stairwell. I gave the doctor who had saved my life one last look. He was lying on the stairs with his left hand over his chest. I never learned what his name was, and I would never have a chance to ask him. I closed my eyes, shook my head, and turned around. It was too late when I suddenly realized something had just touched my back. A cold, familiar, yet strange sensation kept pushing forward through my skin, through the gap between my ribs, through the gaps between my back ribs, through my heart, and finally through the gaps between my front ribs and my skin in front. My dagger had missed the artery by just a little. The tiny bit of mercy that remained in my heart had turned out to be my fatal mistake. I watched as the box dropped out of my arms and fell down the stairs, clanking the whole way down. I reached out in an attempt to catch it, but I couldn't. My kung fu instincts from the Shaolin training were telling me that I should not stay here any longer, and that I needed to get out as soon as possible. Accompanied by the sound of shattering glass, I landed on the ground steadily. Then I saw 2 cars stopped in front of the apartment building. Every person coming out of the cars was an officer from Unit 3. The image of Officer Min Jun lying there with his eyes wide open was still imprinted in my mind. How did he die? Why was he there? Why would Unit 3 show up right now? And what about the suspicious anonymous tip? There were too many puzzles that I wanted to discuss with Lieutenant Kang when I saw him. Never would I ever guess that the next day I would learn an even more shocking piece of news. The lieutenant had died too. And they put a warrant out for me, saying that I had become a fugitive. This case, that had so many ties to Unit 4, had turned into a wild horse charging down a freeway. I no longer had any control over the situation. Perhaps I should not have just run away. Maybe things would have been different if I had just stayed. Okay, so she needs this part. And he needs to stay and kick open the door. Let's see what happens if we do this. I recognized the man laying on the floor. Officer Min Jun's eyes were wide open. There was a dark brown stain near his chest on the dark-colored shirt. The blood had already dried. Judging from the amount of blood and the shape of it, it must have been a gunshot wound. Why would he be here? Where on earth was this place? What had happened to him? I looked around the living room. A lot of empty beer bottles were scattered on the floor, most of which were empty. Some of them were not empty, though, and the beer had spilled all over the place. There was still a lot of burning candles on the floor, too. Lieutenant Kang is passed out over here. I heard Lieutenant Kang's voice coming from the bathroom. Lieutenant Kang? Why was he here, too? I got back up and walked to the bathroom. When I walked past the dresser in the living room, I noticed a knocked-over picture frame. I flipped it over. It was a photo of Lieutenant Kang with a woman in her 30s. Lieutenant Kang looked much younger in the photo. He even seemed a little shy. Both of them were in uniform with their gun holstered. I couldn't look away from the woman in the photo for a long time. Then I finally remembered. She had been the previous lieutenant of Unit 2, Jaeglong Sok, a legendary figure in the Busan Police Precinct. She was a beautiful woman, but more importantly, she was considered to be better than any of the male officers on the force. She was famous for being incredibly courageous and decisive. She was the idol of almost every young police officer. Even during my days in the academy, a lot of my classmates had her photos in their private collections. That was how I had recognized her. The photo had obviously been taken before she had been killed in the line of duty. Lieutenant Kang looked like he had just joined the police too. Perhaps he was a fan of hers too. There was nothing strange about that. So this might be the Lieutenant Kang's home. Why would Min Jun's body be here then? I suddenly remembered the anonymous tip, and I was starting to get more and more suspicious. Officer Min Jun had been shot. He was still in his undercover outfit, which I had seen a few times. I went back to check on his body, and there was nothing else in his pockets, but I did notice a keychain attached to his wrist. I heard Lieutenant Kim walk over from the bathroom. He must be wondering why I hadn't responded yet. I quickly took the keychain off and hid it. Please, Buddha, please bless me. Bless me so that I can find the truth and avenge Officer Min Jun. Okay, we got their S ranks. Oh no. How did it end up like this? How could Officer Min Jun be dead? Carlos, will I ever see you again? Stop. Oh, it was just a nightmare. No, it was more than that. Everything has already happened in reality. But I have tried everything I could. I thought it was raining. However, everything outside looks exactly the same as when I first woke up after losing my memories. The sky is still red. Snow keeps falling down. Even the snow looks red, perhaps because of the light? There doesn't seem to be anybody in the buildings on either side of the street, and there aren't any people on this street. There aren't any animals either, no small birds or little dogs, nothing. There aren't even any trees or grass. The rain only appears in my dreams. It has never stopped snowing outside the window. Is this what the God's world looks like? I wonder what the human world looks like right now.
Yo, you up early?
What time is it now?
4 o'clock in the morning.
It's only 4? Nothing seems to change outside the window. I can't even tell whether it's morning or not. The human world has day and night, right? Why don't we have that?
That's because we live in a different world.
Willie, I want to go for a walk outside.
I'm afraid you can't do that.
Why not?
To us, there is no outside. Everything you see from the window is just an illusion. This house is all there is to our world.
Are you telling me that everything that I see outside the window is fake?
That's correct. Everything outside is fake. Even the house that we are living in right now doesn't really exist. All of this is built by our combined imagination. Our world and the human world have no intersections at all, not in time nor in space.
Well, can we go to their world at all? By teleportation, for example, like you did earlier. Or maybe there is a door of some kind that could open to any other place you want to go to.
Why do you want to go to their world so much?
I haven't been feeling too well recently. This job, it's not like what I first imagined it would be. I thought I could give everyone a perfect happy ending. But tragedies keep happening one after another. I don't know what I have done wrong. Do I not understand them well enough because I'm not human? Or is it because I'm not familiar enough with their world so I can't understand the consequences of my decisions? So
you want to go there and witness their lives for yourself?
Yes.
Unfortunately, we are unable to go to their world. Besides, we don't really need to. We are gods. All we need to do is fulfill the humans' wishes. It is not our duty to create a wonderful world based on our judgment. You have too much kindness in you, and that's why you are overthinking it. No matter what decisions you make, the humans will accept them. Simply because they don't have any other options.
But we're gods. How can we be so careless about their sincere wishes?
Shh. Humans never truly understand what they want, ever. They get themselves into trouble, but they are afraid to take responsibility for their actions and choices. That's why they always hope the gods can fix everything for them. God will help me. God will bless me. They are nothing but a bunch of cowards and losers. As long as we help them resolve their intimate dilemmas, we have done our job. As for the other problems that lie in their future, Those have nothing to do with us. The bottom line is this. Even if we don't help them, all they have. The bottom line is this. Even if we don't help them, all that they have no right to complain. After all, we are gods, and they are just mere humans. Therefore, no matter what you do, you are always right. You will never be wrong. But I understand it might be a little difficult for you to accept this right now. You should just go take a nap and get some rest. We've talked enough today. I'll go make us some breakfast.
Was I really overthinking things?
Well, maybe I have to do it myself.
Do what? What are you doing? What is happening?
하나님, 나를 도와주세요.
젠장,
Playing
어떻게
on
이럴 수가?
No puedo regresar.
18-year-old world. An 18-year-old boy. In the largest arcade of Mongkok, Time Reveals Cup, the Prince of Fighters 97 Nostalgia Tournament. Time Reversal Cup, the Prince of Fighters 97 Nostalgia Tournament. A giant banner was on display. The Time Reversal Cup had been the biggest tournament from classic fighting games in Hong Kong for a few years. It had also been an important source of income in my post-college independent life. After graduating from college last year, I had moved out of my parents' house and rented a 30 square meter studio with a standalone bathroom. I never knew that rent could be so expensive. I never understood why people wanted to buy stuff on sale. I never realized that part-time jobs barely paid anything. Not until I lost financial support from my father and mother did I begin to appreciate the challenges of life. Therefore, I must win the tournament. The prize money from winning the championship would be enough to cover my expenses for 3 months. I had arrived not too long ago and had been testing my machine. People were beginning to gather around, many of whom kept taking pictures with their phones. As the two-time defending champion had been placed directly in the semifinals, so I was expecting a little attention. However, today I was feeling very suspicious about every one of these people. I was about to go and hide in the bathroom for a little while before the match. Suddenly, a wave of excitement washed over the crowd. A small kid had just walked up to the machine opposite mine. He was in his school uniform, wearing a pair of glasses, and his hair was parted to the left side. The staff thought we didn't know each other and started making introductions. This is the primary school killer. He must have heard of him. He has no more rivals left in the Sim Shan Sui area. Last week he challenged the entire North Key arcade. Nobody dared even say a word. I never thought that he would be my opponent today. I silently cursed all the gods and goddesses in my head. And then the punk kid held his thumbs down and made a face at me. The crowd booed loudly. The booing went right into my head along with the history of our rivalry. Now watch out, you punk. Big Brother is going to teach you a lesson for the sake of your parents. Let me show you how to be polite and respectful to your seniors. Mayumagi versus his Kosagi. 2 games out of 3. In all honesty, our raw skills were mostly on the same level. But every time I played this kid, he would always be able to get into my head and mess up my inputs. I would be thinking of a punch but press a kick. I was thrashed in the first game, and I tried my damnedest best to win the second game. Here came the deciding game. The crowd had become wild. Time to go to hell, you little punk. Hell, 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 hell. At this point, both of our HP gauges were alarmingly low. Our special moves were both fully charged and ready to go as well. If either of us made a mistake right now, the other would immediately land a combo and finish the game. I silently wiggled my sweating right hand forward and feigned a retreat. The punk kid took the bait. His punch whiffed. Now's my chance. I command Yogami to jump behind him, ready to unleash the final combo. Gi Shiki Yori Yo. 2B. 5A. 127 Shiki Aki Hana 1. 127 Shiki Ana Hana 2. After 2 consecutive Ikihanas, my opponent had just been thrown into mid-air. It was finally time to end this game with a desperation move. Joystick, left diagonal down, right diagonal right. Joystick, right diagonal down, diagonal left. Hard punch, see? Ghostly purple fires appeared on Yumagi's hand. Light pillars were bursting from the ground one after another. Desperate move, Aura 108 Shiki Yo Shake. Oh crap, that was the wrong move! It was an amazing move that could stun the opponent, but its only drawback was that it was also slow. Kansagi quickly and articulated away from the pillars, nullified my attack. Oh shit. The punk kid smiled behind his glasses. Kansagi jumped on top of me and hit me right in the face. I was still in recovery from the previous move, so I couldn't defend myself. Kasagi then kicked me into the air. Raging fire erupted in his right hand as he held it high. It then turned into a devastating firebomb. While I was staring in shock, it blew Yumagi into the sky. KO. As Yumagi kept flying upwards on the screen, my heart was sinking all the way into the ground. I lost my prize. Gone. I might have to borrow money from my father to cover the rent this month. He would once again try to persuade me to go back. He would once again try to persuade me to go and work at his company. Mother would then try to send me up on a blind date, forcing me to meet people who I had absolutely no interest in. Yet I'd have to pretend to smile the whole time. No. My dear goddess of fortune, please take me away from here. Jimmy. Okay. It's interesting how the profiles update and stuff as they grow and age. Okay. So I have no idea how these are supposed to work, so we're just gonna button mash and flip things around and hope we win. An energy wave burst off the ground and blasted towards Kasagi. Special move 108 Shiki Yomibori. Oh crap, that was the wrong move. Yayoi was still in midair, but I mistakenly launched a shockwave that crawled along the ground. The wave went right between Kasagi and completely missed him. Right below Kasagi and completely missed him. Before the attack dissipated, Kwagaklikuri articulated and dashed towards me. Before the attack dissipated, Kasagi quickly articulated and dashed towards me. I hesitantly readjusted my joystick, trying to change into an Akihana to deter his aggression. However, my momentary hesitation had already decided the result of the game. The punk kid smiled behind his glasses. My move was too slow to stop my opponent, who had already leapt into the air. Kansagi jumped on top of me and hit me right in the face. Kansagi then kicked me into the air. Raging fire erupted in his right hand as he held it high. He then turned into a devouring firebomb, while I was staring in shock and blew Yumagi into the sky. KO. As Yumagi kept flying upwards on the screen, my heart was sinking all the way to the ground. I lost. My prize gone. Okay, let's try this. Yumagi's hand morphed into a blur. He grabbed Kasagi in the air and slammed him onto the ground. His attack, fueled with every last drop of his power, washed over his opponent like an unstoppable waterfall. Kasagi couldn't even hold his posture anymore. Desperate move, Ken 1211 Shiki Oyo Tami. KO. Yes! 3 months of expenses. See how it's done, you little punk? After the ceremony, I was about to duck out of the arcade quietly when the punk kid suddenly blocked my way. What, you want to look for a real fight now? Don't you know my fame of beating up both a senior home and kindergarten on the same day? I quietly thought to myself. Congratulations, mister. I bought you this newspaper as a special gift to you. I took the newspaper. It was some random tabloid. Cover page headline. Despicable Hong Kong youth molests child in the street. Despicable Hong Kong youth molests child in the street? What the hell was this? Several months ago, I had beaten up the little punk primary school killer pretty badly in another casual tournament. Then a few days later, an article began circulating on the internet about me taking off my pants on the street and mooning some little kid. There was even a picture to go with it. Yet, whether you judged it by the shape or by the percentage of body fat, that was not my butt in the picture. And the funny thing was, when I tried to remove the censor boxes from the picture, through some technical magic, I realized that the kid in the picture was actually this little punk. When I ever had a picture taken with him? Besides, what kind of twisted mind would make up such a gross and embarrassing idea in the first place, not to mention actually going through the trouble of faking a picture? Afterwards, I had to hack a dozen websites to delete all of the related articles. And now you had it printed on paper? I didn't know who was more despicable in this whole ordeal. In any case, the more despicable the story was, the faster it traveled. People would always believe this kind of garbage. People in the arcade were starting to stare at me. I knew they had not just come here for the tournament today. What? Did you expect me to tear the paper into pieces and make a scene? Screw you, you little punk. I stuffed the newspaper into the bag with my prize and walked out of the arcade. It was drizzling outside. Life is Good. Life is Good was playing in my headphones. I decided not to take a cab and just walk back to the apartment. I bumped into a few people, but nobody gave me any trouble or even a second look. Yeah, why bother myself with other people's opinions? This was my life, the one that I had always wanted. Alright, so we did it. The final goodbye. I sat in the exam room of the hospital. My fingers kept tapping my knees. Maybe it was because of my past experience, but any time I had to deal with a hospital, I would always worry about the worst outcome. After a long while, the doctor finally came in. He closed the door and sat down in front of me. My hands clenched into fists. He opened the test results and read through them. Then he looked up from the document and stared at me. What is your relationship with her? The diagnosis is stomach cancer. I was stunned. It really was the worst outcome. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't really remember what the doctor had said afterwards. I took the test results and went back to the patient's room. I looked at her, still sound asleep. I wondered if she would just keep sleeping like this. Maybe she would never wake up again. Yang Ying had told me her story. She'd been all alone with no family for a long time, just like me. And now, with this diagnosis, she would have to deal with this all by herself. I could see her bright eyes looking into mine in the flickering candle lights. I crumpled the test results in my hand. Wen Zarin. Oh no. He looked down. There's no way to hide anything. None of this is good outcome. Maybe we can save it from not her? I sat on the steps of the hospital, stunned. I thought the doctor was going to tell me about her condition, but he had given me the test results from my previous hospital stay. About a month ago, I had been in a fight with someone. I had been a little rusty and too hot-headed, and one of my ribs was broken. I had to ask for sick leave from the school because I had to stay in the hospital for a while. The doctor was very attentive. After I recovered, he suggested that I get a full physical. I realized that I hadn't had a physical for a long time, so I thought I might as well get one. Little did I know that I would be getting such a surprise. It had gone dark outside now. I picked up the test results, got up, and went back to the patient's room. The nurse must have just taken her temperature as I saw Li Wen's hand hanging outside the sheets. Her collar was messed up. I carefully tucked her hand back under the sheets, trying not to wake her up. She seemed to be dreaming. She suddenly turned her face to the side and mumbled something. Her face was only inches away from mine. I couldn't move for a second, and I remembered what had happened the day I fainted in my apartment. Even though my heart had stopped and I hadn't been breathing, I had been conscious. I felt someone pressing my chest. I felt someone yelling my name. I felt someone. I knew it was her, but I couldn't move at all. No, actually I could. But I was thinking perhaps I could just let go, and all of this would be over. However, when I heard her crying, my heart suddenly bounced. I opened my eyes with all the strength I had and saw her sobbing uncontrollably. Why would she care so much about someone whom she barely knew? Why? And I suddenly realized the reason why I had cared about her so much. We were just like each other. We must have similar pasts. My strength started coming back to my body. I grabbed her hand as soon as I could, just so that I could tell her I was okay. I didn't want to see her sad. A buzz from my cell phone pulled me back from my thoughts. I had a text message. I walked out of the room, leaning on the wall in the hallway, and opened my inbox. It was from Yang Ying. She had received my text about my condition, and she wanted to see me at the coffee house later. I pressed the delete button. It had been a habit of mine for a very long time. I always deleted my texts as soon as I read them. I would always get annoyed if I had too many texts in my inbox. There were 4 other texts left in the inbox. It's raining. Remember to bring an umbrella with you if you are heading out, Mr. Wynn. Deleted. There's a book signing at the west entrance right now. I just bought an art collection book. I think it's going to be sold out soon, Mr. Wynn. Would you like me to buy you a copy? Deleted. The art show today is really cool. Thank you so much for the ticket, Mr. Wynn. I'm in the gift shop near the north entrance right now. They have a lot of cute little things here. Are you coming today too, Mr. Wynn? Deleted. Mr. Wynn, I'm about to head back. Thank you again. Deleted. Aww. Well, we saved her at least. That's the plus side, right? We saved her. Let's see here. We're gonna do 2 more. Yeah, we'll do 2 more. JL7042, the flight from Hong Kong to Tokyo. This was my first time on a plane, yet I wasn't as excited as I imagined I would be. I closed my eyes, hoping that I could fall asleep until landing. After a while, the plane encountered some turbulence. My face tightened a little, not because I was scared, but because I was annoyed that it had disturbed my dream. I was dreaming of Carlos. In the dream, we finally got to see each other again. We haven't gotten to see Carlos in a minute. I wonder what he's doing. It was late at night. Even though we had not seen each other for such a long time, neither of us said anything. It was so dark that I couldn't even see what he looked like as a grown-up. His lips moved, and he was about to say something, but suddenly the ground beneath us morphed into an enormous wave and swept me away. I opened my eyes. The boy next to me handed me one of his earbuds. He probably thought I was afraid. Some tender music was flowing out of the earbud. I smiled at him with gratitude. He had short and curly dark hair. He looked like he was about 18 years old. Carlos would be around the same age now. I fell asleep again, although I didn't go back to the same dream this time. 4 hours later, at the front desk of the Prince Hotel in Shinjuku, I was checking in. Coincidentally, I ran into the boy who was next to me on the plane. Also coincidentally, his room was right next to mine. He said his name was Lin Wei. He was here on a trip by himself and suggested that we could travel together if it was okay with me. I agreed, but it would have to wait until after I finished my business here. The sun was about to set when he knocked on my door. He told me that he had rented a car and asked if I would like to go take a ride with him along the beach. I said yes. His eyes were a little red, and he didn't say anything to each other on the way. He didn't go directly to the beach. Instead, he circled around Shinjuku a couple of times at first. If he weren't so upset, I would have almost suspected that he had figured out who I really was. I never knew that the target this time was still a kid. Half an hour ago, I had received an instruction from Ray. The target this time was the person staying in the room next to mine, Lin Wei. He was the only child of the boss of Lin Inc., who ran the Black Dragon gang. Whenever Ray gave me an assignment, I never questioned the reason, although this time I didn't really need to ask. The big boss of Lin Inc. was in his final years. Some elders in the corporation had brought up the idea of looking for a successor. Obviously, the big boss wanted his own son to succeed him, and everyone knew it. But I knew Ray too well. He wanted to be the successor. The gang had plenty of enemies in the criminal underworld. This time, Lei Win was traveling to Japan alone, without any bodyguards. It meant that this would be the perfect opportunity for Ray to take him out of the equation. It was quite windy by the ocean. There was a couple of tours hanging around on the beach. I planned to complete the assignment once they left. Lei Win stood there, facing the ocean. He closed his eyes and spread his arms. He looked like a bird who was about to ride the wind and fly into the sky. Miss, have you ever thought about what we live for in this world? I fixed my hair that was flying in the wind. For me, simply being able to live is good enough. I never thought about something so deep. Lei Wen kept his posture. Well, do you have an important person in your life? I do. I looked at the ocean. He put his arms down. What would you do if you couldn't be with that person? I'd wait. He looked back at me. His face was covered in tears. What if you knew that you'll only be waiting for nothing? I suddenly realized that I had never thought about this possibility. Miss, I know what you are doing. Miss, I know what you're doing here. I had seen many other people like you. Lei Wen unbuttoned his shirt and revealed his numerous, horrifying scars on his body. In 2 years, my father will hand the company to me. Miss, you of all people should know how many people want me dead. All of these years, my only wish had been to be with that person on my birthday. I was born in the winter near Christmas. I would always dream about the two of us decorating our own Christmas tree, walking along the festive streets and holding hands like a real couple. But year after year, I could never make it happen. And I will never be able to make it happen in the future. I will not let the person I love get hurt because of me. So I can't be with that person, not in this life. I'm tired of a life like this. The last tourist had just left the beach. He gave me one last smile and started walking into the ocean. The water gradually went over his waist, his shoulders. A few minutes later, I dived into the ocean. I grabbed his hand. I grasped for the salt-tasted air, feeling I was going to be swallowed by the crushing waves at the very next moment. I lay there on the beach. I was completely wet. Lei Wen was lying next to me. Why didn't you just let me die? Isn't that your mission? Why? I don't know. I didn't know. Perhaps I was hoping there would be another possibility for him. It had been 10 days. I still didn't have a strategy to help him. Although I worked for Ray, I didn't really have all the information in the organization. Even in the gang, not a lot of people were aware of my existence. Therefore, I didn't have any useful connections. I was sitting on the couch in my room. A bunch of empty candy boxes were piled up next to my hand. Lei Wen must be an extremely important target to Ray. Letting Lin go meant that I had betrayed him. I might have made the stupidest decision of my life, just out of that one moment of sympathy. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. The person was intentionally keeping them light, so I knew instantly that it couldn't be a regular tenant. My 4 years of training told me immediately that it was someone like me, and he or she was good at this job too. Ray surely wouldn't show me any mercy. Alicia. Let's see here. Gave me one last smile, started walking. I climbed back up to the beach and looked at the dark ocean. The surface was almost pitch black, beneath which had many invisible but violent torrents. The water was also much colder than I expected, and I could feel the chill in my bones. I dove in a few more times, yet I still couldn't find Lei Wen. He had disappeared into the dark ocean. I felt as if a part of me had disappeared with him. Lei Wen was right. I had the blood of over a dozen people on my hands. If I were to be with Carlos, I would bring him nothing but misery. The surface was almost pitch black, beneath which hid many invisible but violent torrents. The water was also much colder than I expected, and I could feel a chill in my bones. Lei Wen grabbed my hand, and he was guiding me ahead. I suddenly understood. Heavenly Father was giving me a chance for redemption right here, right now. We held our hands together and disappeared into the darkness. The hairdryer was buzzing. I was sitting in my hotel room drying my hair with my eyes closed. I was afraid. I was afraid that I would see myself in the foggy mirror and that I wouldn't even recognize my own reflection. The moment when Li Wen had disappeared into the ocean. For a second, I thought it wasn't Lin who was floating away from me, but Carlos. I wanted to swim towards him. But what if I had saved him? What else could I do for him? And how would I report back to Ray? The thought dissipated almost instantly. In the end, I followed my original plan. I came back to the beach at another spot and took a taxi back to the hotel. The same evening, I told Ray about Lin Wen's final moments, but his response surprised me. Starting from tomorrow, you are free. It looks like these are both tied to it. My name is Park Sung-Gwan. I'm 14 years old. I live in a mental hospital. The vice president of the hospital was Dr. Lee Young-suk. He was also my supervising doctor. Ever since I had been sent there at 12 years old, he had been abusing me for sadistic pleasure. I used to cry out loud in my room and hide, but they would scream at me to shut up. I tried keeping a diary to relieve my stress, but I realized the nurses would read it behind my back. When I was feeling extremely desperate, I would pick up the pen and stab myself with it. I forced myself not to cry, no matter how painful it was. It was an exercise. After a while, I gradually became numb to the pain. That way, it would be less painful when I had to go to that room again. Most of the nurses in the hospital were women, but I did come to know one male nurse. His name was Lee Young-Kol. The other nurses said that he was the nephew of Lee Young-Suk, and that was the only reason he got the job. Every Tuesday night, he would take me to Lee Young-Suk's office. He would then just wait outside until it was over. He would then bring me back to my room. One day, he noticed my scars. He could tell that some of them were not caused by his uncle. After he found out that I had been hurting myself, he decided to confiscate my pen. Coward. He knew what his uncle had been doing to me. I also knew that he had read my diaries too. He was too afraid to stop his uncle, but he would take away my pen. I closed the door, threw myself at his feet, held onto his legs, and began crying at the top of my lungs. As expected, he panicked and touched my head with his hands, trying to console me. Since that moment, he became an ally of mine. As an ally, Lee Young-Chol would sometimes use his limited power to get me some small privileges. For instances, I could walk in the garden a little longer than the others. If I could hold on a little longer, maybe I could even find a chance to escape from here. Just when the tiniest ray of hope was beginning to show, I heard a piece of horrible news. My mom had died. I overheard it from the nurses. None of them would ever tell me the news to my face, but they would gossip about me behind my back, commenting on what a poor child I was. I didn't want their pathetic sympathy. I just wanted Mom. For the last 2 years, no one had ever visited me. Why had Mom never come to visit me? I knew why. It must have something to do with Dad. He sold me off first, kept torturing Mom at home, and preventing her from visiting me. He was not my dad. He was a bad person, a monster. I wanted to kill him. I pretended that I hadn't heard the news. Every night I would cover my face with my blanket so the nurses wouldn't notice me crying. In secret, however, I began to plan my escape. Another Tuesday night, in a room without light, there was only pale moonlight. He and I, 2 people. Everything was exactly the same as 2 years ago, except for the lack of a sinister smell in the air. I had long given up the fight, so he no longer needed something like that to subdue me. But this night wouldn't be the same as usual. He didn't expect for me to pick up the chair and throw it at his head. He pushed me to the ground. Yi Yun-suk was outraged. He slapped me square in the face twice with both of his hands. I fell to the ground. Everything looked like a blur, and I didn't have any more strength to fight back. The chair only broke the phone behind him. I knew I had to be physically stronger to have a chance. But the horrible diet and the mental and physical torture I had been subjected to was only making me weaker and weaker every day. The door opened. I didn't have to look to know it was Lee Young-Chol. He had seen this scene countless times. He isn't feeling well today. Shall we wait until another day? Hey, pigs were flying. When did he start defending me? I chuckled twice despite my bleeding lip. Who gave you permission to speak? Facing the rage of his uncle, the little bit of courage Lee Young-chol had mustered up crumbled immediately. He walked out of the room in silence and closed the door behind him. Nothing had changed. Lee Young-suk took off his belt and thrashed the back of my legs, followed by the usual routine to add to the mayhem of scars on my back. Nothing had changed. No, that wasn't true. Something had changed. I had changed. I was no longer the same kid from 2 years ago, even though I couldn't really remember what I had been like back then. Nevertheless, I knew one thing for sure. Even if I became a pile of worthless human garbage, I would not stay here forever. I wanted to go home. I had to go home. God, do you hear my wish? Park Sung-gwan. I was lying still on my bed with my eyes closed. I could feel the breeze coming and going. The annoying mosquito kept interrupting my thoughts. Damn pest. I flicked the bloody body of a mosquito away like a small booger. Dinner time. A small tray was pushed inside through the tiny window. A bowl of rice, a plate of cabbage, 2 pieces of fried chicken, and a banana. Why do I only get 1 piece of chicken? The fat man in the opposite cell yelled at the guard who was delivering the meals. He didn't get an answer. I picked up the banana from the tray and started peeling it. My diet had actually become much healthier ever since I had been sent here. I never had a meal on time back at the police station, and the food was always burgers, chicken, fries, and occasionally leftovers that had been around for far too long. There had been a few times that I got to eat some nice meals, though, when Chang Guan-ming would bring over some of his homemade bentos. Kid would always say something like, "A healthy body is necessary to defend justice," which made him sound like a whiny old lady. But I was starting to miss that kid. I had no idea how he had been doing. He must be in a lot of trouble right now. Or maybe not. The people who had framed me must be keeping him out of the case altogether. What happened to Min Jun was all my fault. On the day I went to rescue Ji Yun, I tried to get Min Jun to join the mission, but I hadn't been able to reach him. The kid had always been the one person who would never miss a call. It was the first time ever that I couldn't find him. I should have realized that something might have gone wrong then. He never showed up at the police station afterwards either. I told Cheng Guan-ming that Min Jun had been sick, but I honestly had no idea where he had been. It turned out that he was dead, and his body had been hidden in my room. He must have known something, and they had killed him for it. The murderer must have also known that it was the same day as the anniversary of the lieutenant's death. He even knew that I would be very drunk that day, so he would have a better chance of success. 2 birds with 1 stone. I had some idea of who that bastard could be, but I had no evidence at the moment. I needed to find a way to get out of here first. A tall shadow moved on the cell floor. The guard who had brought the tray was still here. He was watching me eat, almost like he was monitoring me. His name was Young Hulk. At least that was what I had heard the other guards calling him. He was over 2 meters tall and very muscular. He might be the most menacing person in the detention center. Anyone who stood before him might feel like they were standing in front of an impenetrable wall. However, young Hyuk had a secret. Detention Center number 6 was a prison that was used to exclusively hold police officers who had been in trouble. It did not belong to the police system, and therefore was not under the supervision of the police bureaucracy. Therefore, everyone who had been thrown in here had to go through a ritual. The fat man in the opposite cell was locked up because of a 50 million won bribe. Every day he and I were forced to strip naked and were blasted by cold water. It wasn't that much different than a cold shower to me, but the fat man, he would be screaming bloody murder every time the water hit him. The more he screamed, however, the more excited the guards would get. For them, it had turned into a kind of entertainment. Young Hoke's reactions, however, seemed a little different than the rest of the cheering mob. One of my best buddies was gay. I could sense the same vibe from him. The fat man yelled at me in a lowered voice. "Hey, can I trade this banana for your chicken?" "Screw you." I suddenly had an idea, but I needed somebody's help. 20 minutes later, young Hulk came back to take the trays away. There was something extra in the tray, a small paper note. Now all I could do was wait until the middle of the night. 12 a.m., most people here had fallen asleep, but I was sitting in a chair in the interrogation room that But here I was, sitting in a chair in the interrogation room that had seen numerous occupants. A piece of yellow tape covered my mouth. My hands had been cuffed behind my back. My brand new scars had been added to the current collection of my body. I had made a mistake. Young Hook was standing under the fluorescent light with a belt in his hand. His uniform was now soaking wet with sweat. Just a moment ago, the belt had hit me on my left eye, which was so bruised that I couldn't even open it anymore. I absolutely hated these simple-minded meatheads, especially when they could overpower me. If he had simply agreed to my proposal, I would have let my buddies find him a few handsome guys as a thank you. Then everybody would be happy. Now he was just torturing me for nobody's benefit. Well, since enticement had not worked out, that left me with the only other choice: threats. Though how was I supposed to threaten him under the current circumstances? Should I summon that guy? Didn't seem like a good idea. Young Hoke seemed like he would never get tired. The pain he inflicted on me was almost to the edge of what I could tolerate. I had been trying my best to control it, but in the end, he still woke up. The light from the swinging bulb cast some moving shadows on his impatient face. Idiot. I took out the pen and stabbed it into him. The pen went right through his eye socket into his brain. He was dead in an instant. So was my consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself back in the cell. It was a different one this time, and there were more guards at the door. I felt my pocket. As usual, there was another note. I opened it, and it said, "Your clothes stink. I told him to get you 2 new sets." That bastard had landed me into such a big mess, and all he cared about was some clean clothes. I now had another life on my hands. Min Jun's case was still highly inconclusive, but this one was much more straightforward. I had indeed killed Young Hook. How could this have happened? Damn it. King Bakya. Okay. So I don't know how we got the other guy killed, but I feel like we're gonna have to go back and find a way to keep him alive. Can't hide information. We could always stop the doctor. Let's see if we can get out of here. Young Huck was hit straight in the face by the chair. He lost his balance and fell to the ground. He watched as I broke the handcuffs with my bare hands, and he couldn't process what he was seeing. 1, 2, 3. I stomped his bloody face with my feet over and over again. Had once seen myself break another unfortunate bastard's arm with one stomp. If I kept going, he was going to die. I stepped away from the corner of the dark room and walked towards the center. The mysterious invisible force appeared again almost immediately. It was as if there were numerous dark hands there that were pushing on my shoulders, grabbing at my ankles, trying to stop me from walking into the light and regaining control of my body. I was pushed down to the ground, but I kept crawling. More hands were grabbing my feet, my legs, and dragging me in the opposite direction. I could not give in. I would not give in. At last I grabbed my feet. "Enough, you bastard! Get out of here!" The hands suddenly scattered away. I could see clearly again. Young Hook was crouching in the corner, looking at me with fear. He reminded me of a frightened little rabbit. I had scared him, and he had not realized that the person standing in front of him was a different one now. There was a wallet on the floor. It wasn't mine. I picked it up. There were a few bills, a credit card, and a receipt from a gay bar from only a few days ago, as well as a family photo. A beautiful wife, a lovely daughter. What a happy family. The happy lady surely had no idea of the secret life that the husband and father of the family had been leading. The little rabbit had no other choice. I plunged the pen deep into his throat. He stumbled back, pulling out the pen, and threw it onto the floor. Lots of blood was gushing out of the hole in his neck. I could see that he wanted to kill me very badly. However, with one hand covering his wound, he tripped and lost his balance, making a mess of his office. Soon he was lying on the floor with his eyes wide open, but he was no longer breathing. He was dead, but that was too good for him. Before anyone noticed what had happened, I quickly searched the entire room. I found his hospital key card, some cash, and a Swiss Army knife. I ripped his clothes off him and put them on myself so that mine wouldn't get bloody. Then I decided to cut him. He couldn't feel it, but I thought it was his turn to suffer. In that moment, I felt so relieved. Even the air in this room suddenly felt cleaner. I opened the window and slid down the drain pipe. The security guard on duty was watching TV in his office at the main gate. I ducked down and snuck past his window, opened the main gate with a swipe of the key card, and ran outside. Finally, I was free. Finally, I could go home. I walked all the way home with my flimsy clothes. I walked all the way home with the flimsy clothes I was wearing. I walked past Alex's seafood store. I walked past Sue Me's family bakery. I walked past a tobacco and alcohol store that had forgotten to lock up. Picked up the most expensive bottle of vodka from the shelf. It was for my dad. Twice a week, 8 times a month, multiplies by 12, 96 times 2, 192. Let me round it up to 200. I was walking briskly. At the same time, I was quietly calculating how many times Mom had been hit by Dad for the past 2 years. Just as an estimate. It was almost sunrise when I finally saw my familiar yet strange home. As I expected, Dad was sound asleep. I changed into Mom's favorite coat, and I went into the kitchen and picked up the knife that Mom used to cut meat. At last I came to my dad's bed. Dad, I'm home. 1, 2, 3, 66, 67. The sound of the knife going in and out of his body was almost a musical melody. 122, 123, 124, 199, 200. Blood was splashed all over the bed and the floor. It was disgusting. I sprinkled the vodka that I brought home all along the bed in the room. Then I lit a match. Bye, Dad. Bye, Mom. The small flame was jumping and growing. It was becoming bigger and bigger. In the end, it grew so big that it swallowed this place I used to call home. I had never seen anything more beautiful. In the ashes, I would start a brand new life. Okay. I don't know if I want to end it on that note.
好想再见他一面。
Lo siento.
Oh no. Okay, I think I'm gonna actually end on Les Winds, the cafe across the street. I hope it's not as dramatic as that. Please end me on a high note. I opened my eyes. I saw a white ceiling. I saw white walls. I saw white blankets and beds. And I could smell the strong odor of detergent. How did I end up in the hospital? It was very late. There was no one in the hallway. I found the nurse's station and asked for my record. It said I had gastritis. I never knew gastritis could make someone pass out. The nurse told me that I was mostly fine. I just needed to take my medication for a couple more days. But it was already too late to be discharged today, so I had to wait until tomorrow. She also mentioned that it was a middle-aged man who had brought me in. A middle-aged man? Could it be him? Probably not. There were plenty of middle-aged men out there. Since I was mostly fine, I decided to go home anyway. I couldn't stand the sight of the hospital for one more minute. I had too many bad memories from being in a hospital. A young man was standing in the hospital entrance looking down at the ground. Maybe he was feeling down because a family member had been sick too. I walked towards the subway station. At the last crossing, the lights had just turned from green to red. I saw 2 people sitting next to the window in the coffee house across the street. 2 very familiar people. Miss Yang and him. I stepped forward without even realizing it. I had forgotten about the red light. A truck charged directly at me from the side. Its headlights had blinded me. My entire body was swallowed by the light. The truck didn't stop after hitting me. I had been left lying in the street when someone found me. It happened to be the same young man who had been standing in front of the hospital earlier. I was brought back to the hospital, but this time I wasn't mostly fine. I probably would not survive the night. I realized that I had so many regrets. Why couldn't I tell him how I truly felt? Why would I always have to be torn apart from the most important people in my life? Lei Wen. None of this was the lightheartedness that I needed. 9 a.m. It was the least busy hour of the day in the coffee shop. I was wiping the glass carefully with a cleaning cloth. Mama, who loved and happily shared his feminine side, was sitting next to the bar and perusing a woman's fashion magazine, while occasionally letting out a yawn. There was also a customer in a strange hat that had been here since we opened this morning. He put out his 8th cigarette in the ashtray, put down an adult magazine that he had brought with him, left his booth and went into the guest restroom. There was no one else in the shop but the three of us. I had left Ray half a month ago. I didn't know where else to go, so I came back to the Maple House. It still had the same decorations, but not the same people. Raja had gone back to India. Hung had become a legal resident and got married. On my first day back, I had told Mama everything about being auctioned off and abused. But I left out everything related to Ray. Mama was crying so hard that his entire face was wet. He hugged me so tight and told me of course I could come back, and I could stay here for as long as I wanted to. I tried to get back to a normal life. I wanted to save up a little more money so that I could bring Carlos over to live with me. Ring, ring. A middle-aged man with a thick beard had just walked in. I was carrying a glass pitcher of water when I accidentally bumped into him at the door, water spilled everywhere. I caught the pitcher 20 centimeters off the ground. I caught the pitcher 20 centimeters off the ground before it got smashed into pieces. He was carrying an umbrella with a long handle. It was raining heavily outside. My clothes were soaking wet. Water spilled onto my clothes. The black dragon tattoo on my stomach became vaguely visible through my wet shirt. I apologized and turned around to go to the back room so that I could change into another shirt. I'm in a hurry. I heard something else hidden inside the 4 short words. It was extremely familiar sense of menace. Then I noticed his umbrella out of the corner of my eye. I didn't suspect anything earlier because of the rain, but now I realized that his umbrella was completely dry. I ducked down and sprinted to the kitchen. Multiple deafening gunshots erupted behind me. The meticulous painted walls were littered with holes from the shotgun. I dragged Mama into the kitchen. His fake eyelashes had fallen off. There was nothing but a bloody hole where his left eyeball was supposed to be. His and my blood was spreading all over the kitchen floor. Suddenly I heard a flush come from the restroom outside, and nothing else. He was so confident that he wouldn't even bother coming in to make sure that we were dead. The bearded man must be coming after me. He couldn't be here for any other reason but revenge. I had made a mistake. I should not have come back. I should not have expected to lead a normal life. My mind was becoming cloudy. Mama, I'm so sorry. It was my fault. Alicia. Okay. Let's see here. If it's not raining over there, it can rain over here, so him carrying the umbrella will be weird. I apologized to the guest who had just come in and showed him to a booth and poured him a cup of coffee. Then I went back to the door and started cleaning the wet floor. I heard a flush come from the restroom. The guest with a hat walked out. He walked past the new guest booth and went back to his own. He took a 9th cigarette out of his pocket and put it into his mouth. Then I noticed a flame pop up near the end of this cigarette. I walked over with a kaffa, leaned over and refilled his mug. I whispered into his ear, "Excuse me, but this is a non-smoking establishment." If he were a fellow hitman, he would have understood. The guest with the hat heard my words, nodded gently, and put the cigarette back into the pack. The menace that had been brewing in the air suddenly dissipated. The bearded man kept glancing over at us the entire time. He wasn't a regular guest either. The dagger under my skirt was ready to be unsheathed. Our eyes met, and then I saw him raising his right hand with the umbrella which had been hanging from the table earlier. He pointed it at the guest with the hat and me. I had never suspected that the umbrella would be his weapon. The guest with the hat reached for his cigarette pack, but it was already too late. Multiple deafening gunshots erupted. Dozens of bullets went through our bodies. Blood and flesh were flying off of us, painting the shop a bloody maroon. I was drenched in sweat because of the nightmares. Well, now that my clothes were already wet, I decided to just go home in the rain. I walked into the heavy rain. I walked towards the subway station. At the last crossing, the light had just turned from green to red. I saw two people sitting next to the window in the coffee house across the street. Two very familiar people, Miss Yang and him. I stepped forward without even realizing it. I had forgotten about the red light. A truck charged directly at me from the side. Its headlight had blinded me. My entire body was swallowed by the light. The truck didn't stop after hitting me. I lay there in the street. The rain was so heavy that everything around me seemed blurred. I could feel the warmth of my body washing away with the rain. It was getting colder and colder. I was freezing. I struggled and took the photo out of my pocket and opened the recording app. Took the phone out of my pocket and opened the recording app. This time, no matter what, I had to tell him how I felt. Mr. Wen, I think I'm dying. It hurts really bad. I wanted to tell you something. The day of the exhibit was actually my birthday. I hadn't celebrated my birthday for years, so thank you for the ticket. I really wish that I could go see the rainbow in the mountain with you. It must be beautiful. Too bad I probably can't make it anymore. I want to leave you everything I have in my apartment. There's still many boxes of chocolate milk left. Don't let them go bad, please. I really liked your sketch. I was only kidding last time. And The phone fell out of my hand, and it kept recording the sound of the rainfall. Yeah, that was bad on all parts. Okay. Oh, so we can change Alicia's. I apologized to the guest who had just come in, showed him to the booth, and poured him a cup of coffee. Then I went back to the door and started cleaning the wet floor. I then heard a flush come from the restroom. The guest with the hat walked out. He walked past the new guest's booth and went back to his own. He took a ninth cigarette out of his pack and put it into his mouth. Then I noticed a flame pop up near the end of his cigarette. I walked over with Akartha, leaning over and refilled his mug. I whispered into his ear, "Excuse me, but this is a non-smoking establishment?" If he were a fellow hitman, he would have understood. The guest with the hat heard my words, nodded gently, and put the cigarette back into the pack. The menace that had been brewing in the air suddenly dissipated. It wasn't a regular cigarette. There was probably some elaborate mechanism inside. I myself had never used gadgets that were too complicated. I did sometimes hear that some fellow workers in my field would often use some unusual murder weapons that I had never heard of. He probably wasn't here for me, but if he insisted upon messing up the shop, the dagger under my skirt would have. But if he had insisted upon messing up the shop, the dagger under my skirt would have to stop him. The bearded man put down some cash on the table and left. Soon the guest with the hat gathered his cigarette pack and adult magazine, gave me a nod, and left too. I soon noticed that I was being followed for the next few days. There was more than one tail on me, and none of them was just some random slob. I couldn't tell if it had anything to do with the guests from that day. I asked Mama for some time off and decided to stay out of sight, alone for a while. At the very least, I could not bring Mama into this. Water had spilled on my clothes. The black dragon tattoo on my stomach became vaguely visible through my wet shirt. I apologized, then went to change into another shirt in the back room. When I came back, both the bearded man and the guest with the hat had left. I soon noticed that I was being followed for the next few days. There was more than one tail on me, and none of them were just some random slob. It couldn't be for other reason but revenge. I asked Mama for some time off and decided to stay out of sight, alone for a while. At the very least, I could not bring Mama into this. Are you going to the subway station? I nodded. Let me walk you there. I've got an umbrella. He showed me the umbrella in his hand and squeezed out an unnatural smile. We stood on the platform, slightly waiting for the last train of the day. Another young couple was there, too. The headlights of the train lit up the tunnel. I was looking at the train and didn't notice what was happening behind me. When I heard the young couple scream, the young man who had walked me here had already laid down on the rails. The train kept running as if he wasn't even there. I only heard a muffled noise drowned out by the wind. Huh? What? Let's see here, because the guy is using the umbrella as a gun. Let's see if this way will do it. I went back to the room and hid under the blanket. Even with my eyes closed, the detergent smell still kept reminding me of where I was. I still couldn't escape these memories. In my earliest memories, my father was the only person that I could picture in my mind. He was a great painter because every painting of his was great. As far as I could remember, he had always lived in a big house. As far as I could remember, we had always lived in a big house. It was so big that sometimes I couldn't even find my father. When I was in elementary school, we had moved into an apartment. Father and I would often play with each other in the evening by throwing pillows. When I was in middle school, we had moved into a single-room studio. Most of the space was occupied by his paintings. A few pieces of furniture sat in the rest of the room. We would sleep on the floor when it was bedtime. The place was so small, and many mornings I would wake up and realize that I had crawled into my father's bed in the middle of the night. Life wasn't easy, but I was happy. Father began to take on more and more assignments, most of which were not in his style. He would also set up a booth on the street to paint portraits of the pedestrians. Sometimes I would fall asleep before he even returned home. We lived like this for 2 more years. Then at some point, I couldn't remember, Father started drinking. He spent more and more time inside and less time smiling. He would often tear up his own paintings too. On that day, Father woke up early in the morning to watch a tennis game while he drank. Empty beer cans were all over the table. His stomach hadn't been doing great in the first place. The excessive drinking was not helping. I had a huge fight with him. I had never been angrier in my life, and I had never seen Father so mad either. Still, whatever he had said to me, had done to me. I should not have said what I had said. I hate you, Father. Those ended up being the last words I ever said to him. When I came home from school that day, I found the TV on the same channel as it was in the morning. A commercial was on. There were paints all over the floor, and Father was lying in the middle of them, motionless. I was standing in the corner of the emergency room when I watched them cover his face with a piece of white cloth. They say there was no need for further medical assistance. Death felt so unreal to me at that time. I was unable to process any of it. I sat on a hospital bench in a complete silence for a long time until a doctor crouched down in front of me and softly said my name. I finally cried. I cried my heart out. I love you, Father. But he couldn't hear it anymore. I woke up, and I couldn't tell where I had been in my memories. The boundaries between nightmare and reality had been blurred by my tears. I sat up in the hospital bed, sobbing uncontrollably. If only everything had just been a nightmare. A wrinkled blue jacket that smelled like paint was placed softly over my shoulders. He had come in without me knowing it. He didn't say anything, just quietly put his arms around me. We sat there like this, until the sun came out. Aw. Water had spilled on my clothes. The black dragon tattoo on my stomach became vaguely visible through my wet shirt. I was about to apologize when I noticed the umbrella in his hand. Something was not right. It was a sunny day outside. He was here for me. I jumped behind the bar, pulling out the gun Mama had hidden underneath. Multiple deafening gunshots erupted outside the bar. The meticulously painted walls were littered with holes made by his shotgun. Mama was hunched over his magazine, and his fake eyelashes had fallen off. There was nothing but a bloody hole where his left eyeball was supposed to be. I stood up behind the bar and aimed at the visitor. Sweat, tears, blood, and my makeup were smeared all over my face. Suddenly, I heard a flush come from the restroom. The door opened quietly, and a thin silver thread flew across the air and went through the forehead of the bearded man before my bullet could. The thread morphed into a needle and pinned itself on the daily special menu on the wall. Guest with a hat walked gracefully out of the restroom with an unlit cigarette in his mouth. He gathered his adult magazine and left, but he left a business card on the table. It had a simple design, but unusual contact information on it. A few words were printed in bold on the thin white card. Zucco, assassin. For business, text 999-666-888. Okay. None of that was the happiness that I had hoped for.
Carlos, te extraño.
Mission.
老天爷，请赐予我勇气，
Promise.
好想再见他一面。
결코 이렇게 되진 않을 거야. Porque siempre me pasa esto.
What's going on? I've never seen a blacked out letter before.
Let me explain. A letter will turn black when its preconditions cease to exist. So a black letter means that the events inside the letter never happen. What is happening to Carlos might have something to do with his sister.
Do you mean that something that is happening to his sister might have an impact on Carlos?
Yes.
But judging from their letters before, I don't think they are writing to us at the same time. Alicia is 9 years older than Carlos, but both of their first letters were from when they were 18 years old.
You're exactly right. That's why the events of Alicia's letters will have an impact on Carlos. What is happening to Alicia now happened in Carlos's past.
Oh, I think I get it now.
By the way, we will not be able to process the blacked out letters. As you can see, the other letter connected to it is also in a locked state. A locked letter means that other letters connected to it are blacked out. If you see a locked letter in the future, go and check the status of the letters connected to it. When you see a blacked letter, you may try to open it to obtain more clues. The clues are shown as the black dotted line. The letters connected by these dotted lines are the reasons the previous letter is blacked out. Knowing this, we can start by examining these letters first.
Understood. Let me take a look at those letters then.
Oh, here is one small tip. Remember what happened in Carlos's previous letter?
If I remember correctly, it was about what happened in the auction house after he brought Yi there.
Right. Do you remember which ending you chose for him?
Of course, he saved Yi and also managed to escape himself.
Then what happened?
Then... Oh, he was taken away by the police, wasn't he?
Yes. You could go and check again. Because of the impact from some other events and the endings might have changed.
You mean that even with the same ending, the details of it could be changed at any time?
Yes. Such changes might happen in non-ending parts of the stories too. It doesn't happen very often, but if you pay attention, you might find it interesting. Okay. We're gonna actually leave it here for right now. We'll pick up next week on this. Let's see here, because it blocked out everything. Looking at it, everybody's letters are all blocked out. So we'll have to change probably the endings for Carlos and his sister. But, like I said, we'll pick that up next time. Thanks for playing with me, everybody, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!